Hey guys, welcome back to First and 10 over here on Clueless Gamers. I'm your host, Pete. As always, joined in a second here by my co-host, Brian. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to the podcast. If you've not been by here before, you don't know what the hell is going on. Yes, this is a segment that is a little bit different on this channel as opposed to normally the movie, TV show kind of content that we cover. This is a football podcast. NFL football is what we do on this channel, in this podcast. Brian and I have talked about this for a long time. This is almost our second, Brian, if you could believe it, completed season of this podcast. Almost 2 years in the making we've already been doing this, which is pretty crazy. And so with that, I'll welcome you in, Brian. How you doing tonight? What's going on? And man, we're a few days away from the Super Bowl.
Yeah, always a fun time. Really looking forward to this one. Even as excited as I am, I know my excitement level doesn't compare to yours with your own team being in the Super Bowl that you
Yeah.
get to see. So, what a treat that will be. I mean, I'm sure you got a lot of nervous energy flowing through you,
Oh, yeah.
but come Sunday, we'll see what happens. I expect it to be a good game. I'm really looking forward to the matchup.
Yeah, I hope it's a good game. As Brian just said, if you haven't been by the channel, I'm a diehard Rams fan. I've been like that my entire life. And 3 years ago, when we played the Patriots in, early 2019, it was the 2018 season. It was not only disappointing that obviously the Rams lost, but it was incredibly just a disappointing game overall. I would say
Yep.
most people, if you polled them, even non-NFL fans, they would say it's probably the most boring Super Bowl they ever watched. It was just a snooze fest. It was 3-0 for most of the game, and the final score was 13-3 Patriots in just a really bad game. It wasn't even like there was tons of turnovers or anything. It was just a lot of 3-and-outs and missed opportunities. Brady was also horrible too. Him and Goff
Yeah.
were both terrible. Definitely Brady's probably worst Super Bowl, if you don't really count the first one where he was basically a rookie there. So hoping at least, you obviously want the win as a fan, but hoping at least just for a way better game. Maybe we score a touchdown this time, so that'd be really
And
nice.
and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the only touchdown in that game was scored by Sony Michel.
Yes, it was. It was I believe, second quarter touchdown because I think it went 10-0 into the break. I believe the Patriots went 10-3, and then they scored that game-winning field goal and that big Gronk catch in the second half
Yep.
that kind of sealed the deal. And also remember, there was the dropped-in touchdown that ended up happening by Brandon Cooks, and then it looked like he should have got a PI call later of defensive pass interference against them that would have put the Rams on the 1-yard line. And none of that happened. A lot of people said maybe it was due, considering what happened 2 weeks before that of the kind of blown call in New Orleans, and then we don't get the call in the
Right.
Super Bowl. So maybe that's just it wasn't meant to be. But hopefully this time everything we have went through, we'll see the outcome. So with that being said, guys, we do different segments here on the channel when we talk about here in the NFL, and we jump around to different topics. And there's a lot to talk tonight, and we're going to get through it in a very short amount of time because it is late here on the East Coast as we are recording this. Always in the description, there are timestamps. So if you want to jump around to hear about what we're doing or what topic we're going to at what specific time, feel free. You don't have to listen to the entire podcast. We completely understand, but just click around to what interests you. And hey, if you want to listen to the entire podcast, we greatly appreciate that. There's a couple loyal viewers out there. I saw Calibro commented in our show about a week and a half ago, so greatly appreciate you guys interacting as well. It's much it helps the algorithm, let's say that, and it's much
By the
appreciated.
way, Caliber was pretty spot on in his comment, but
He
he not
was.
only did he get the prediction right, but a lot of his analysis wound up working out how he described. So shout out there.
Yeah, maybe in the offseason or next season we'll get him as a an avid Giants fan. Maybe we'll get his perspective on where that franchise is going and some NFL thoughts. I think that'd be a lot of fun to maybe get guests in season 3. We had Dylan in season 1 step in for you 1 week, but it'd be nice to get some guests. The quote unquote studio here at my house is improving. The situation's improving, and so there's going to be a lot of technical upgrades for season 3 that I'm really excited about. But you know what? We're not here to talk about any of that. We're here to talk about the damn Super Bowl that is taking place in 3 days in SoFi, Bry. Super Bowl 56, man. I can't believe there's 56 of these. It's going to be the Cincinnati Bengals taking on the Los Angeles Rams. The Los Angeles Rams realistically, location-wise, the home team, but actually are not the home team. The Cincinnati Bengals are the home team here in the Super Bowl. There's a lot to break down, Bri, in terms of, previewing this game and some X factors, and then ultimately picking who we're going to go with. So let's start with preview, Bri. We're previewing the Super Bowl here. And if we take a little quick synopsis back, you saw what the Cincinnati Bengals have been for a number of years. We know they won the division with Andy Dalton, and then they can never win a playoff game under Marvin Lewis, that whole story, right? And then for a lot of years after that, the last few years, they were in, mirrored in mediocrity, really, right? Like they were a terrible, terrible team. They're always said to be kind of maybe the cheapest franchise under owner Mike Brown in the entire NFL. I would still contend that, considering they're the only team in the NFL that doesn't have a closed-roof practice facility in cold Cincinnati. And so this team is kind of hamstrung by a lot of the things going for them. They're not the most ideal kind of free agent destination. They've had some kind of disastrous draft picks. But you know what? Life kind of changed for them, Bri, a couple of years ago. They get the first overall pick. And they draft this guy called Joe Burrow, this QB that transferred in college and had maybe the most magical year ever of a college quarterback, coming out of LSU, national champion winner, sets all these damn records in college football. And he goes to Cincinnati. And a lot of people, I think, like that. Those some comparisons that I saw out there of, Tony Romo's and the like. But no one, I think, thought he was going to be this good this quickly. And even before we get to his only second season right now that he's in the Super Bowl, this guy shows promise in the first year. And after 6 games in Washington, completely has his knee annihilated. I mean, ripped up. MCL, ACL, meniscus, everything. Massive reconstructive surgery. And a year later, to come back, go through the gauntlet of the AFC. They beat the Raiders at home and get over Derek Carr. They knock off the number 1 seed in the Titans. They go to Arrowhead, and they beat the Kansas City Chiefs. And, we did the picks for the conference championship games, but, we'll talk a little bit about that as we preview this. And then now to lead his team in only his second year to the Super Bowl. I mean, Brian, what can you say really about Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals? How do you see how this magical playoff run has taken place?
Yeah, it really has been remarkable, but talking about the quarterback, it just goes to show that when you get that player, when you get that franchise quarterback, it just changes things immensely because like you brought up Andy Dalton, who was, what you'd call a
It was
serviceable
good.
quarterback. He's kind of bounced around after Cincinnati. Had some good years there with the Bengals, but just was not the guy that could get them over the top. I mean, it was abundantly clear when they got to the playoffs. It seemed like they always matched up with the Texans. I feel like that happened like
I
3
know, right?
times, and they lost all of them. So they just were never. And those teams were very talented. Like I would have said they were close to Super Bowl caliber as far as the talent they had overall on those teams, but the quarterback just couldn't elevate his play enough to reach those heights. But you just got the sense right from the get-go with Burrow in that rookie season before the injury that you mentioned, there was just a feeling like this guy belongs. I think that
Yeah.
happened very quickly for them, and to see how they've turned it around so quickly is really the remarkable thing. But they've built a good team. They've got weapons around them. Yes, they need to do some work on the offensive line. There's some
Oh,
similarities when I
yeah.
think about with the Colts and Andrew Luck, right?
Yes,
The
yes.
offensive lines were always an issue there, but Luck was just so good right away. Never got his team to a Super Bowl though, of course. So
No.
Burrow's already ahead in that department. I just see some similarities. Both number 1 picks kind of dragging teams that you never would have expected to go far like Luck did with the Colts. And you just hope for Burrow's sake that he's able to stay healthy because if he can, unlike Luck, he should have a long and very fruitful career ahead of him.
Yeah, I think that's well said. I think the issue is, I think it goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway. I mean, we talked about last offseason about what the Bengals really needed, and I think this Bengals team on both sides of the ball, even though Joe Burrow is obviously the catalyst, they wouldn't be here without him. There's a lot more talent on this team than there were on a lot of those Andrew Luck Colt teams. I mean, he was dragging some terrible teams with some limited players, I think, to the playoffs. And then ultimately, sometimes to his own kind of demise, he made, that unfortunate turnover, and that ended up kind of sullying the team and their playoff chances. I always, it's sad to think about, but I always think about his playoff career, and I think about two moments. I think about that big comeback against the Kansas City Chiefs and Alex Smith, and then I also think about the just absolutely bludgeoning that he got from the New England Patriots. Like, those are in the AFC Championship. Those are kind of the two that always stick out in my mind with Andrew Luck. But, what Joe Burrow has been able to do with this team, I still have questions over head coach Zach Taylor, who obviously comes from the Sean McVay tree. But there's a lot of talent on this team, and that defense I've been championing all year has been extremely underrated. We're going to talk a little bit about more of them in a second, some X factors here as we dive deep into this Super Bowl preview. But it's just I got to look up the odds, but like, what were the odds that the Cincinnati Bengals would make the Super Bowl before the season started? I mean, they had to be incredibly high. There's definitely a few people out there that won tons of money when that game happened in Arrowhead. And, I'm happy for them, man. I like Joe Burrow. I like his swagger, but it's not like a kind of off-putting version of it, like kind of Aaron Rodgers, the way that is. Like, there's just something cool about Joe. There's something just... He can be stoic, but he also can be fun and give kind of a sarcastic line. He just seems like a guy you would want to coach, and he's a guy that you want to play for and play around. He just seems like an overall just a good dude.
I agree. And, looking at the last game, the AFC title game, I mean, that was just a really interesting game, the way it played out, where the Chiefs the Chiefs jump out to a huge lead, and you just think they're well on their way to cruising to a win, and how that game changed on a dime in the second half, but really started before that. We know the botched play with the Chiefs not scoring a touchdown, throwing the full pass out to Tyreek Hill, and he couldn't get into the end zone. But I thought the first touchdown that they had, when Burrow found the backup running back P. Ryan, who took a screen pass all the way to the end zone, that was like, okay, it was a terrible start for Cincinnati, but now they got their touchdown just before the half, and then the fact that the Chiefs botched it, like, that was just a huge momentum swinger. And then coming out in the second half, where the game just was completely different. The Chiefs were stymied by the Cincinnati defense, which just had a terrific performance. And then, of course, picking off Mahomes in the overtime and setting up the game-winning field goal. It was just a great performance top to bottom. Yes, with Burrow, but that defense that you mentioned too, what a job they did against the explosive Chiefs attack. Really didn't have anything to show for anything in the second half of the game.
Yeah, that was, if we're transitioning a little bit here, if we just want to jump back to that AFC Championship since the last time that we were together, there's nothing else you can say other than that was an absolute historic collapse. I don't think that's overstating it from the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, that was horrible. I've never seen in my life two tails of a half that way. A lot of times you see it like the team comes out slow in the first half and then maybe they explode in the second half. Completely vice versa in this situation. And as you hinted to, but I think it's even more important to touch on, that play at the end of the half, that was a horrible play call by Andy Reid and Eric Bieniemy. There's no reason that should have happened. And Mahomes has to know better. He's got to change that play. He's got to throw that ball out of the end zone. To think with 5 seconds left with no timeouts that you're going to be able to get Tyreek on the end zone with two guys out there running a little flat route that you basically threw at the line of scrimmage. It was just a horrible idea. I think the Bengals just came and scored a touchdown. You're up 21-10. Take the easy field goal. Go up by 2 full touchdowns. And now the momentum is kind of changed in, hey, we still got these guys. Hey, we're still up by 2 touchdowns now. We made this a 14-point lead, and I think it becomes significantly harder for the Bengals to come back there in the second half, and it gives the Chiefs a world of confidence. And you know what? They didn't do that. They gamble it. I think they ran a really bad play. I mean, at least if you're going to do that, you got to throw the ball in the end zone. And so I just don't understand the play call, even if you're going to make that decision. And I disagree with the decision. And now the Bengals just scored a touchdown. They just made this great goal line stop, and they got away with no points, never mind 7 or 3 points. All the momentum was with them. So when they come out in the second half, was I surprised by how lifeless the Chiefs offense was? Absolutely. But was I surprised that Cincinnati was kind of riding the momentum and fighting back. Not at all. Not even a little bit. And how that game kind of plays out where, the Chiefs, they get the field goal there at kind of the end of regulation again. And I go, here we go again. This is a la the Bills from last week where, they're going to win this in overtime. Sure enough, they end up getting the ball first. And the offense was just, they were even more than lifeless. They were useless. Right. You throw the first two plays to Demarcus Robinson, who hadn't had a single target the entire game, and the second one of those two throws almost gets pick six by, I believe it was Eli Apple, I think it was, one of the corners. And then in the next play, you throw a deep overshot on like a go deep post route to Tyreek Hill, and he's double covered. He's got one guy under and one guy over him. I had no idea. As soon as that happens, I went, well, this is over. I was like, the Bengals got the ball at like the 40-something. I was like, yeah, this game's over. And sure enough, Evan McPherson setting rookie records left and right as the kicker. And, from Gator Nation there, Florida Gator, knocks it through and sends the Bengals to their first Super Bowl trip since, 1988, I think?
It's been a while.
1988, 1990, something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely a surprising game. There's a lot to talk about, I think, in the offseason with the Chiefs, but getting back to the Bengals, it's been nothing short of a spectacular run. And now we go over, Bride, to the other side of it, and we preview the Los Angeles Rams, right? Second year in a row, it had never happened before. The second year in a row now that the home team who owns that stadium is playing in their home stadium, even though they're not actually the home team of the Super Bowl, which is always, hilarious to me. And the LA Rams, they went through an interesting season. I think we've well documented on this podcast. If you've been listening, I think my rant went a little bit viral in the middle of the season when they were in the midst of a 3-game losing streak where they played absolutely atrociously. Matt Stafford's throwing pick sixes left and right, and the team was just absolutely imploding. The San Francisco game, the Tennessee game, all these things that happened. And to turn it around where it wasn't like it was this amazing finish to end the season. You had that huge win, all the COVID rack stuff going on Monday Night Football against the Arizona Cardinals, but that win became less and less impressive as the Cardinals fell more and more apart down the stretch. So there wasn't really a signature win. They pull out that last-second win against an undermanned Baltimore team. There was a lot of things that weren't overly impressive with the Rams, which culminated in the last game of the season, blowing a 17-0 lead at home to your arch-rival 49ers, who won their 6th game in a row when they defeat the Rams in overtime 27-24 in the first NFL's Week 18 of their history. And you just have to be defeated. And the only reason they win the NFC West is because the Cardinals choked once again and lost to Seattle. And so they kind of back into the playoffs where they have to then play those Arizona Cardinals, and they bludgeon them. And then they go down to Tampa Bay in a weird game, 4 fumbles, trying to give the game away. It just seems like everything is kind of just swaying, or it feels like it's being rigged, even though it's not, toward Tom Brady, which we'll talk more about him in a few minutes. And they pull that out with the great 2 Cooper Kupp plays and the aggressive play calling, and some blown coverages, obviously, by Tampa as well. And then you get to this NFC Championship game, Brad, that had, and let me tell you, man, I wish I had some recordings of how I was feeling during this game. It felt very much like the same story, did it not? The Rams.
Yeah, it really did.
Everything is going the Niners' way. The Rams are not getting any penalty calls at all. The one I'm definitely referencing is that illegal headbutt by Fred Warner on Matt Stafford after the interception. Even though it wouldn't have negated the interception, it would have 100% been added 15 yards to the interception return. So there was just calls being missed like that, left and right and left and right. And then the Niners were just doing the same thing they always do, right? When Garoppolo plays, they throw these inside passes, these seam routes, these slant routes, these, tight end and wide receiver screens. Like, that's just always how it happens. And the Rams could not stop them. And then the Kittle play happens, right? The Kittle play happens. They go up 17-7. They hit that kind of in-seam route that they have on the left side of the field. And the people I was with, I said, yeah, that game's over. I said, it's over. I was like, they're down 17-7. It's the 4th quarter. It's this team yet again. They're in their head. They have their number. It's over. And to make the comeback, Bri, that they did. The defense showed up. The offense showed up. They had some help. The penalties started going their way. There's a horrible dropped interception by Jaquiski Tartt that gives the Rams new life. And they pull it out, hitting a field goal in the last couple minutes. And then Aaron Donald, even though he didn't get credit for the sack, annihilating the offensive line. The defensive line showed up in the fourth quarter. They get to Garoppolo. He throws an errant pass. And the rookie, Travion Howard, picks it off to seal the Rams going to the Super Bowl. I mean, what did you make, Bri, of that NFC Championship game, and what have you made overall of this run of the LA Rams to the Super Bowl?
Yeah, well, I think you could probably document play by play what happened in that title game. I mean, your recall is pretty impressive, but no, I mean, this game, the way it was playing out, like, I agree with you, and you know that I tend to be more optimistic about your team than
Yes, you do.
you are, even as a fan, but, like, the way that game was playing out, and they're down 17-7, I'm just thinking, this is exactly the kind of game the 49ers want to play, and they were doing it again. I'm like,
Again.
this might be a team that's just in their heads, and they can't solve them. It just was heading that way. Was it the first drive the Rams had, or maybe the second, because they went 3-and-out on the first one, but their driving looked like they're going to score a touchdown. You get the tip ball interception.
He forced it.
A major,
He forced the cup.
And it was like a major red flag right off the bat that I was like, oh boy, maybe this won't be the Rams game. But the way they rallied, the plays that Stafford made, and silly me for thinking, I just came to thinking that, like, there's got to be some game where Cooper Kupp doesn't just wreck the game, but every game he's doing it. I mean, it's
every
uncanny.
Damn game.
Yeah, I mean, it's like he's good for a touchdown or two and double-digit catches and like 150 yards. It's just the season he's had is just absolutely insane. The consistency is what's making it remarkable. Like, it's every game that kind of production. So it's like you go into the Super Bowl and you expect him to do it again because it's just what he's done.
So.
And 2 more touchdowns, just another great game for him. Stafford again stepping up big. And I mean, that last drive when they forced the turnover was tough to watch for if you're a 49er fan. I mean, I remember Troy Aikman making some comment. It was just like, this is just an abysmal possession. If they went backwards and then Garoppolo just desperately tries to get rid of the ball. I mean, if he takes a sack there, I get it'd be like 4th and a mile, but you're almost better off that than forcing a ball like that.
Yeah, because in the past, Bri, they've converted those 3rd and 33s, those 4th and 20s against the Rams.
So you were probably thinking they were again.
Oh, 100%. And then when Donald's getting him, I'm like, sack him. And then as soon as the ball went up in the air, I said, oh my God, we're going to pick it. I just knew it. I was like, holy God, what a mistake. But, like, I understand he was under duress and he was just trying to get rid of the ball.
Yeah, I mean, there really was it was a no-win situation there. And, you know, at that point, the Rams had sealed it, and you'll see them in the Super Bowl. But at one point I just want to make about why I think this performance coming up will be a lot different. I mean, it almost feels weird that they were in the Super Bowl with McVay, because it was like such a different group with Jared Goff as the quarterback. And, you know, you're not going against Brady this time. And the fact is, they didn't have Kupp in that game. He had gotten hurt in that regular season. So not only do you have Kupp, but you have this superhuman version of Kupp now.
Yeah. Well, we flip-flopped. Remember, in that one, we had Robert Woods and no Cooper Kupp. Now we have Cooper Kupp, no Robert Woods.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think you'd want it this way over the other, but
the way the season's
I
gone.
just feel like it's the Rams' time right now. I feel like it's Stafford's time. I feel like it's Odell Beckham's time. Kupp's, of course. You know, the moves that they made really paid off after we questioned them early on, and yeah, I just feel like it is the Rams' time. I mean, I wouldn't just say the Bengals are happy to be here, because you would never say that about a Super Bowl, but I just can't look at this team. And I know it's been a great run, but do we really think, like, the Cincinnati Bengals Super Bowl champions? I just don't see it. I think they're going to end up coming up short.
Yeah, I don't know, Brian. I mean, there's so much to just wonder with this game, but it was the NFC Championship. I just want to say has to be one of the happiest sports moments I've had in my life. It's actually funny, Brian, because I believe I said it on this podcast, and if I didn't, I said it to you probably off camera. the playoff structure for the Rams, the way it went, that is exactly what I wanted and exactly what happened. Down to like the last week of the season, when I saw the Rams were going to lose that game to the Niners, I said, okay, here's the seeding. Here's how I want it to play out. Here's what I think could happen. I think the Niners have the best chance. They'll beat the Cowboys. I think they have the best chance out of anyone to go up to Green Bay and knock them off. And I said, you know what? I want them to come back to us if we beat Tampa. And that would be the perfect way to earn a trip to the Super Bowl. And that is exactly what happened.
Yeah.
It's just great, and it's awesome too, because this time, regardless of what happens and who wins, it's so nice that I just don't have to hear anyone, and rightfully so in some ways, say, hey, this team doesn't deserve to be in the Super Bowl because of how that New Orleans NFC Championship went. It's just nice to know that we earned it, there's no controversy about it, and I could just enjoy the Super Bowl for the Super Bowl and hopefully a victory. But with that being said, let's talk about some X factors going into this game, Bri. I think it'd be a little obvious if I said the name Cooper Kupp, right? Because, duh, right? But for me, on kind of the offensive side of the ball for the Rams, it's actually going to be someone that probably no one heard of before that's not really a Rams fan before a couple weeks ago. It's tight end Kendall Blanton. This is a guy who stepped in. It looks like Tyler Higbee, who got hurt pretty badly in the NFC Championship game. He had a knee injury. He left. Thankfully, the Rams thought it was going to be a lot worse, kind of like a torn ACL. It wasn't, but it's still significant enough that he is more than likely, like a 99% chance, is going to miss the Super Bowl. He hasn't practiced all week. So Kendall Blanton's going to be that guy that I would imagine is going to step up and fill into that role. And this is a guy who caught all 5 of his targets, had some key conversions in the NFC Championship game. One of them I'm thinking was that kind of flea flicker tight end screen, which is something I don't think I've ever seen before that McVay pulled out in that game. He, for me, is going to be a major X factor because they're going to double Cooper Kupp. That, OBJ will get his targets, but they'll probably shadow some double coverage over to him now and again, but the security blanket was Tyler Higbee. And I think now Kendall Blanton has to kind of work that middle of the field against guys like Logan Wilson for Cincinnati, and he's got to do some damage and maybe either convert some first downs or at least make them second or third and shorts, get those 4, 5, 6, 7 yard catches. So right now, for me, he's probably the major X factor for the Rams.
Yeah, I think that's a good call, and very surprising to see how he stepped up so seamlessly in the absence of Higbee in that title game, because as we know, Higbee's a pretty big part of the offense. When I saw him limping off, it reminded me in the Week 18 matchup, Higbee had at one point limped off, and it seemed like he was pretty badly hurt, and then he comes back in, and he had 2 touchdowns that game. So I was wondering if it was going to be a similar situation this time, but certainly appeared more serious. So, yeah, I like the call with the tight end. I was thinking Rams offense, where to go. I feel like Odell Beckham's too big of a name to call an X factor, so I think I'm going to go to yeah, I think I'm going to go to a player that I referenced before, who was on the other side when the Rams were last in the Super Bowl with the Patriots, and that's Sony Michel, who's now the Rams running back. And Cam Akers is going to get his touches, but how much you really rely on a rookie who missed so much time this year. So I think Michel, as the veteran running back, is going to get some work here. You have to run it to keep the defense honest a little bit, take the pressure off Stafford, not have him drop back, 40, 50 times in this game. So I think a veteran like Michel, who has Super Bowl experience, will play a decent role. I'm going to go with him as an X factor.
Yeah, Cam is basically a rookie. He's a second-year player, but I think you've seen that kind of fumbleitis in the Tampa Bay game. And while he got his share of carries, you saw Sony Michel come back, have almost as equal number of carries, even though he wasn't as effective in terms of actual yards. But I think that is a good call. He's a guy with experience. He has a ring. He scored the only touchdown against this team last time 3 years ago. And he's the downhill between the A-gaps running back, the goal line guy, the guy that can make those conversions. And I think sometimes the Rams and McVay can get a little too cute when they get in those 3rd and 1s, 3rd and 2s. Sometimes just pound the rock. And you know what? They just went against 2 of the best run defenses in the entire league in a row in Tampa Bay and then against San Francisco. I'm not saying that the Cincinnati defense isn't fantastic against the run, but they're not great. And so now you have an opportunity that if you want to stop some of those pass rushers and Hendrickson and Hubbard, that's a way to do it. Run the damn ball. And so I'm kind of hoping the Rams do that. So that's a good call. On the Bengals side of it for me, some X factors that I'm looking at there, and I just said his name, and I don't care if he's had a fantastic season. He needs to show up huge for the Bengals to win this game, and it is Trey Hendrickson. I mean, this guy has been nothing short of maybe the best free agent pickup of the entire offseason of last year, considering where the Bengals are right now. He led the team in sacks. You saw what he's been doing in wrecking shop in the playoffs. That whole really Bengals defensive line, even despite some injuries in the Las Vegas game, has been fantastic. And against this Rams offensive line, which can be had sometimes, especially when they go against power, they can be had. And what is going to be likely probably the final game either way of Andrew Whitworth's career. We've seen a lot of him, losing a little bit of kind of steps there in speed. I think that the interior of that line can definitely be out-physicaled for the LA Rams. And so for me, I'm looking at Trey Hendrickson. He's a guy that the Rams have to stop, have to contain if they're going to be able to pass and even run the ball in this game.
Yeah, and he's had a terrific season. You know me, I usually look to the offensive side of the ball while you focus on the defense. So I'm sure a lot of people would go T. Higgins here. I think we brought him up in the last game, and that proved to be a definite X
Oh, yeah.
factor pick. All the attention that Jamar Chase draws, and Higgins had a terrific game. So I certainly could see going with him, but I'm going to go a little deeper and pick out Tyler Boyd to
Okay.
make some plays in this game because I think he's probably third on the depth chart, but he's better than a lot of number 3 receivers
Oh,
out
yeah.
there. And when you're that far down, you're going against more of the backup defensive backs for the Rams. So I think he could take advantage of that matchup and make some plays. And we've seen him have some big games in the past. He had a very good college career at Pittsburgh. Was a big factor, early on in his career. Then kind of the shine came off him when Chase came in and Higgins, but he's a player that I think has some ability, and I think will make some plays in this game.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Joe Mixon is another person to watch. I mean, that Rams defense did a fantastic job in bottling up probably the best run play designer in the NFL and Kyle Shanahan in the NFC Championship, holding, Eli Mitchell to like 50-something yards, I think he ended up having, I believe it was. Actually, I think it was even less. It was 20 yards. So they did a fantastic job. I think it was 50-something yards overall as a team. So they're going to have to stop Joe Mixon in this game. They're going to have to stop the Cincinnati Bengals kind of run offense, make them one-dimensional. I'm not saying, making them one-dimensional is pretty damn good compared to other teams. They have Joe Burrow. They have all these weapons. I believe there's a question mark still if CJ Uzomah is going to play, right? I think that's kind of up in the air right now, isn't it? I think because
I think he's trending toward playing from what I've seen.
because I know he got
Yeah.
nicked up against the Chiefs, and so I was wondering if he was going to end up playing in this game. Let me look real quick here. Yeah, I mean he's practicing ahead of it, so it looks like his arrows pointed up in this game, which is a little bit better than the Rams' current situation right now. But you know what? Overall, I think there's a lot of factors in this game. We're gonna go super in depth, obviously, after the Super Bowl kind of ends and end this game. But I think we've talked a lot about it. I think the fans, the listeners probably could see where we're leaning. But who are you picking to win Super Bowl 56? Bengals or Rams?
Yeah, well, I'm very interested to get your pick because as we all know, listening, you have not picked your team in a single one of these playoff games
No.
throughout this run, and that, yes, includes the Arizona game, believe it or not. So you don't have a great record there. But nonetheless, yes, I am going with your Rams. Like I said before, I really just believe it's their time. When I heard Odell Beckham in one of his post-game interviews talk about how he feels like all the events of his career, and we know it's been a wild ride, starting with the
It's been
Giants and then
tumultuous.
cast off in Cleveland, that he really feels like it's all set him up for this moment. To me, if it's setting him up for this moment, it doesn't end in a Super Bowl loss. Like I think he reaches the top of the pinnacle and I'm going with the Rams to win. I think it's their time. The season that Cup has had, got to figure he's going to have another big game. I just feel like the Rams have few weaknesses. As long as Stafford takes care of the football, I think they win this game. I think it'll be close, but I'm going Rams by a touchdown.
Give me a score, Bri. I want to hear a score.
Yeah, my score pick in the NFC title game was 27-20. That wasn't too far
Yeah, it's pretty
off.
good.
I'm thinking probably a little more points in this one. I'm gonna say 34-27.
Wow. Okay. Um, the Bengals are a dangerous team. I mean, they feel like they're kind of on a storybook Cinderella season where everything is just going right with them. I mean, hey, any playoff game you could get sacked 9 times and still win. I think you're doing pretty damn good. This is a little bit of luck on your side and maybe a little bit of Ryan Tannehill. But I think the Cinderella story is going to end here, Bri. For the first time, I'm
Yeah.
going to pick the LA Rams to win this one, and I'm praying that they win this one. Now, would I be surprised if the Bengals win this game? No, I actually won't. I think that's a lot of talent on this team, and I definitely think there's an avenue. I mean, for God's sakes, they're in the Super Bowl. So I think there is a definite avenue for them to win. They are the Cinderella story, the darling pick of most of these people. I don't know if you've been watching some of these shows, but actually a lot of people have taken the Bengals.
Yeah.
They seem to just be kind of riding the momentum where you would think LA with all, the prestige and the so-called money and all the stars, as a lot of people seem like they're either rooting against the Rams or they're just outright picking the Bengals. But I just think this is the Rams' time. I said back in 2018, I picked the Patriots to win that game. That's ultimately ended up what happened. And I said it was too soon, right? I didn't think we had enough firepower with Jared Goff. And while Stafford has disappointed me in some ways with some of his questionable decisions, we seen one of them a couple weeks ago in the NFC Championship with that interception, I think he's put the critics to bed, regardless of what happens in the Super Bowl, that he can be a playoff QB, that he can win in the biggest of spotlights on the biggest of stages. He's done that. He's gone 3-0 here. He's played some road games, he's played some home games, and he's played flawlessly, literally in every one of them. In every one of them, there wasn't a single game that he either played poorly, Bri, or that the team carried him. He was the driving force in every game, particularly the last two, with his 2 kind of comeback drives there at the end of both of those games that led to a 3-point margin win in each game. So for me, I'm going 27-24. I think it's going to be very AFC Championship. I'm seeing the Rams win this by a field goal. Maybe it's in the last seconds, or maybe they make a defensive stand, very much so, of the NFC Championship, and right after they kind of kick the game go-ahead field goal, which will ultimately be the game-winning field goal. I think this one's going to be very close. I think it's going to be a very, very entertaining Super Bowl. And at the end of the day, it honestly doesn't even come down to Stafford and the offense as much. Obviously, they need to show up. It comes down to this defensive line, all the money, all the draft capital, all the trades that have been put into that. They got to show up against this porous Bengals offensive line. I mean, they have to. They can't let Joe Burrow go to work and carve that secondary apart, which it can be a little bit vulnerable at times. So we'll see what happens. I'm excited. I can't wait. Hopefully going to be a great halftime show as well. But yeah, for the first time, and hopefully I don't regret it, I'm going to pick the Rams to be the Super Bowl 56 champs.
And another factor I think too is how the Rams match up with Jamar Chase, and that they have a legitimate number 1 corner in Jalen
He
Ramsey,
said he wants
who
him.
I would figure he shadows him most of the
That's
game,
what he
right?
said. He said he
Yeah.
wants him. And so, I don't think that will exactly happen. A lot of times they end up, fitting it, into their defense. But to me, I think you just double cover Chase. If Ramsey is not on Chase, you double cover him wherever else he is. If like Ramsey, that play is on Higgins or he's on somebody else, you double cover Chase. He's the game breaker. He's the one that can really take the top off of a defense. And there's a lot of weapons on that Bengals offense, but I
Yep.
think it all goes through him first and foremost. So
And that's the thing too. There's a lot of weapons that you can't forget about, as we talked about CJ Uzama
yeah.
and guys like the backup running back P. Ryan, who had a huge play
Mhm.
against Kansas City. Those kind of guys can make plays too, so you can't forget about them.
Yeah, I think that's why too. It's going to come down to the Rams being able to effectively run the ball with the kind of their mini two-headed monster that sprouted up in the last few weeks. They're going to need it because you can't keep giving Joe Burrow 12, 13, 14 possessions as the game goes on. It's just not going to end well in your favor as the AFC playoff teams have found out. So guys, that's our picks here for Super Bowl 56. We're both going Rams, but we both think it's going to be a very close game. Me thinking it's going to be closer than Brian. But let us know your thoughts kind of down below on what we talked about a little bit of the two championship games and kind of how some of those went. I know we didn't go super in depth with those, but I think we covered those enough. And then going into the preview and we gave some X factors. We'd love to hear your thoughts down below. Brian, before we get out of here tonight, there's been a lot of coaching news and headlines that have been going on in the NFL since we last talked. Quite a few openings have been filled. There's been a few openings. I believe there's one or two, I think, at this point that haven't really been filled. But for the most part, everything else has been filled. You know, we start in Las Vegas. The Raiders did not go with Rich Bisaccia. He actually ended up going to be the special teams coach for the Packers, which Lord knows they need that. The Las Vegas Raiders go up to New England and they grab Josh McDaniels, former NFL head coach of the Denver Broncos and the Tebow situation and all that. We see how that went. He was the head coach, or was going to be, of the Indianapolis Colts, and then, he kind of flat left that job and went back to New England. But getting his first official second head coaching job, if you could put that together in a little bit of a brain blend. He goes to Las Vegas. He's going to work with Derek Carr. There is some intriguing offensive pieces there. I mean, Bri, I gotta get your thoughts. I mean, what did you think about that hire? Did you like it? Are you kind of meh on it? Where are you at?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, because at first when I heard like Josh McDaniels, that was kind of my reaction. I was like, "Meh, really? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't really like this." But then the more I thought about it, the more sense I thought it made. Just because for a guy like Josh McDaniels, who long has been linked to a lot of different jobs through the years, and you mentioned the agreement that he had with Indianapolis and what went on there, but I just kind of feel like the waiting that he's done has allowed him to find the right place. And
Mm-hmm.
I feel like Vegas will be that for him. See, I think sometimes guys rush into jobs that either they're not ready for or they're just not ready to be coaches, not ready for that second chance. I think the fact that he had as long of a gap as he did while still coaching, as the Patriots offensive coordinator and all the success he had there, I just really feel like he could be a good match for Derek Carr, a team that made the playoffs despite all the turmoil that they had there. And you got to figure things will be a little quieter off the field next year. So, and he's a very good offensive mind. I think that could end up really working out well. I have to say, overall, like looking at all the jobs that were filled, it kind of underwhelmed me, like the names that were picked. So I
Yeah.
think McDaniels is probably one of the better choices.
Yeah, he's definitely one of the names that pops out. I mean, I think it still remains to be seen. Can he effectively win on a team that does not include Tom Brady? We saw in the last couple of years, how that New England situation went, your Cam Newtons of the world, and how Jared Stidham didn't pan out. And then, you saw some, progression out of Mac Jones in his rookie year, but nothing that kind of wows you and blows your socks off. So Derek Carr is a really good QB. I've been praising him on this podcast all season. And, there's definitely some offensive weapons there that they have. It's just, can they get the defense in order, which has a really solid defensive line but does not have as great of a secondary? Can they continue to improve that? And can they continue to improve this offensive line? I think that's going to be the keys. But, Bri, they're in a brutal damn division. I mean, that's even without the rumors of Aaron Rodgers going to Denver. I mean, they are in a brutal division with Herbert and the Chargers. Obviously, what Mahomes and the Chiefs are. It's going to be an uphill climb there in Las Vegas. It really is.
I agree. The thing I would say is like yes, we all love Justin Herbert. I mean, he's just great to watch, a specimen at the quarterback position. But the Chargers have been a team that's like, what have they done? I mean, it's
Yeah,
it's really been a
it's true.
long time since they've playoff relevance. So until it happens, you have to consider it a question mark. So, I don't just automatically peg the Chargers as like this playoff team every year that Herbert's quarterbacking. And the Raiders, what they did this year to me was impressive and shows that they belong with the other teams in the division. So, I think they have a shot. I do agree with you. It won't be easy. It'll be an uphill climb, but I could see the Raiders having some level of success.
Yeah, they could. I mean, when you got that guy at QB that I believe they have, and anything kind of is possible. But I'm just not really the biggest fan or believer in Josh McDaniels. So I guess we'll see if he proves the football world and he proves kind of me wrong. We talked about the Nathaniel Hackett hire that happened in Denver last time. That was a head coaching spot that got filled. But we go to Jacksonville, and the last time we talked, Bry, Trent Baalke, the GM, is fired. It seems like that was kind of the ultimatum situation for Byron Leftwich. It seemed like he was a shoo-in. This was his job. We expected it any day the last time we did this podcast. And then he kind of drops out of the race after the Jags kind of mess around. They seem to fall out of favor with him. Who knows what the hell happened over there? And out of this whole thing, a name that's been floating around for the last year or so, Doug Peterson, former Super Bowl winning coach of the Philadelphia Eagles, who kind of took the year off this last year on a mini sabbatical that he went on, becomes the head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars and now kind of tries to, I know it's only going to be the second year, but considering how the first year went, kind of resurrect Trevor Lawrence's career. What did you think about that hire? I thought that was I surprised that Peterson got hired? No, but I was under the impression that this was Leftwich's job. I mean, what happened?
Yeah, it seemed like that would be the case. I like the Peterson fit there. The thing that stands out to me is of all the new coaches that were hired, only two of them with previous head coaching experience.
Yeah, a lot of
And Doug
coordinators.
Peterson's one, the other being Lovie Smith, who I don't think
Yeah,
anybody expected
we'll
to
get
get
to
a
that.
job. I mean, I don't even know if we'll get to the Texans because I don't think they're really worth our time right now. But I like the idea of Doug Peterson. By the way, is a Super Bowl winner. I mean, some people might forget that because of the way things ended in Philadelphia, which was, strange, ugly, however you want to put it. And as we've said in the past, just seemed like he was sabotaged with the way things went down with the quarterback situation and how he played it out late in that season. But, a guy who won a Super Bowl that early in his coaching career should definitely get another opportunity. And I think this is a really good spot for him. For a quarterback where there's very high hopes. Obviously, year one, things didn't go well. Urban Meyer proved to be a disaster, as we've well documented. So I think Doug Peterson goes in there and the Jags show significant improvement. That's what I would say. I mean, certainly nobody would expect them to be anything close to a playoff team, but I have to expect a lot more than 2 wins or whatever they had this year because he'll bring credibility, and I think he'll get a lot more out of Lawrence, and I think that's the biggest thing with Jacksonville.
Yeah, I think you're a little bit higher on the higher than I am. Doug Peterson I think could be solid, but just I think the way it ended in Philadelphia, was it him? Was it his miscommunication with kind of the ownership and GM Howie Roseman and how that whole last game of the season went? Really, that last season and kind of the deterioration of Carson Wentz. Can he resurrect Lawrence and kind of, improve him going into the second year in probably one of the worst in a whole context, not just on the field, but off the field, kind of one of the worst rookie seasons we've ever seen for a QB as hyped and taken as high in the draft as Lawrence was. And I just, given the Leftwich situation, given the history of Jacksonville in the last recent years, I don't have a lot of faith in the structure of what's going on there, the communication from top to bottom. And it just seems like, given that there's a non-existent fan base. Players seem like, as soon as they get good, they want to get out of Jacksonville instantaneously. I just have my doubts even in a weaker division. Can Doug Peterson kind of make a name for himself and make some noise? But, it's a solid hire. I think there's just so much talent that needs to be added to the Jacksonville roster, and we'll have to see what happens. Brian, you mentioned it real quick, the Lovie Smith hire in Houston. You want to talk about an out-of-nowhere hire. Strange. Yeah. I mean, he's at Grambling, I believe, in college, and they pull him out of here. He hasn't coached since he got fired with the Bucs. And this seems like a situation, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong if you think different. I mean, this seems like a team that absolutely somehow was going to convince themselves and wanted to hire Josh McCown, who's a
Yeah.
high school coach right now, who's never coached even as a coordinator in the NFL in his life, former NFL quarterback, obviously. And it seems like because of a lot of the backlash that ended up happening with the Brian Flores situation, that they kind of went with Lovie Smith. They went with a kind of minority candidate. Obviously, Lovie being an African American who has, a trip to the Super Bowl under his belt as well. It just feels like a weird hire that ended up happening. I don't love it. I think the situation in Houston is set up for him to absolutely fail, and it just feels like this is another kind of stopgap 1 or 2 year coach, very much to David Culley that just got fired this offseason.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think you summed it up well. And when I saw that he got the job, it was like Lovey Smith. And what are we back in 2010? I
Right?
mean, like he had a nice run with the Bears. They got to a Super Bowl the one year.
2005 they got there. I mean, come on.
Right. And I mean, he was there a while, never worked with particularly top quarterbacks, and they had some good teams mainly based on defense, and he's a defensive coach. So I'm not saying he can't coach, but his go round that you mentioned with Tampa Bay was not as successful when he went back to the college ranks with Illinois, and that was a disaster. So like, if he's not going to have success with a mid-tier college program, how is he going to do back in the NFL with a team that is just decimated right now and has no quarterback? I mean, maybe it's Davis Mills. I don't really
I
think he's any
guess.
kind of an answer. Watson's probably out the door. So, yeah, I think he's absolutely set up to fail, and the Texans just prove they continue to be very dysfunctional.
And then we go to another, I thought, kind of weird hire um, in Miami. Mike McDaniel. And if you're asking
Yeah.
yourself, who the hell is that exactly? He's been kind of a long-time offensive assistant with Kyle Shanahan, with the Shanahans in general, dating back to kind of Mike Shanahan. He gets hired to be the head coach in Miami, and it's a weird situation. I don't know if you saw his press conference, where I thought was a little bit odd, where he apparently identifies as multiracial. He has an African American father, but he wouldn't really talk a ton about that, and was just kept saying that he identifies as a human being. It was like a really just uncomfortable kind of setting, in my opinion, at least, and it was just weird. And given that this guy clearly was not calling the plays under Kyle Shanahan, there's not a huge amount of coordinating experience there in terms of him being an OC, not really doing much, some offensive assistant roles. And this is going to be the guy that kind of works with Tua, who I kind of think has the most, the lowest ceiling out of a lot of the QBs that have been drafted in the last few years. I mean, what did you make of the Miami hire? Was it just surprising? Did you think it was right? I mean, how are you feeling about that?
It was a bit surprising. I know we both were in agreement the way things ended with Brian Flores was grossly unfair, and obviously we know there's another layer to that. But yeah, this choice was strange. I mean, I mentioned before that there were only two coaches who were picked that had previous experience. So McDaniel obviously falls under the group that of no experience that'll be first time coaches, and there's quite a few of them. And the way I'd look at it is like one or two of them might turn out to be really good. How we have no idea, how they're going to do, and until you get into that job, like you can go to the past jobs that they had and say, oh, they had success as a coordinator here, but who knows how that translates to head coaching? Like one of them might turn out to be the next Sean McVay type, and most of them are probably going to flop miserably. So like when I say how is McDaniel going to do, I would say I don't know, but I'd say that the odds are more likely that he fails because Miami, that's been the history lately. They've run through a lot of coaches lately. Obviously, like you talked about, he's kind of a different kind of personality. Doesn't strike you as your prototypical football coach. Maybe that ends up working out great for him.
Maybe.
Maybe he turns out to be
Yeah.
the next great coach, an offensive mastermind, or maybe he's looked at as a total fool, with the way he conducts himself and the team is just inept in every way. So I right now have to put it as a big question mark.
Yeah, just some weird hires that I think have taken place kind of this coaching cycle. But yeah, I guess we'll see what happens. He kind of becomes, well, he does become the only offensive-minded head coach in the AFC East. You have obviously Belichick and Robert Saleh and Sean McDermott. So that kind of is a changing of the guard there. Does it yield results with Tua? Who knows? I kind of doubt that, but we'll have to see what happens. The other one, for our buddy Caliber out there, the New York Giants, they hire Brian Daboll, an offensive coordinator coming from Buffalo. We kind of saw this coming with the Joe Sheen kind of hire a GM coming from Buffalo. There was some rumors here with kind of Brian Flores. Could he kind of be brought in because there was some connections he had in the Giants organization? But they end up going with Brian Daboll. And you know what? I have a lot more faith in this hire. I know coordinators, as you mentioned, could not work out. But you know what? This is a guy, we saw how bad Josh Allen was in his rookie year. And we saw what he was in that divisional round playoff game against Patrick Mahomes. I mean, the progression that he took every year has been astounding. Now, do I think Daniel Jones, can he do that with him? I have my doubts there. But if they can get off Jones's contract and get off of him after this year, and then maybe they can go forward with another QB next year, I think there's some hope there because the Giants do have a couple pieces here and there, but overall, this roster needs to be majorly rebuilt. And I'm comfortable at the moment giving a guy like Brian Daboll kind of a turn at the reins. I mean, how'd you feel about that hire?
It seemed to be looked at like universally praised by Giant fans. And what I think it is more than anything else is they were all just so happy to see Joe Judge gone that they basically didn't care
who went back to
who
New
they
England,
brought
by
in.
the way.
Yeah, and I mean, I understand that sentiment, but I'm just at a point with the Giants right now where I just think they're so lost that I can't get that excited about another first-time head coach coming in. And I know the success that he had in Buffalo and how great Josh Allen played and progressed, and there's no doubt about that. But I don't see him coming in here, and unless you're telling me that you're going to give him time, because that's what it's going to take for the Giants. They have to find some stability here. This bringing in a coach and firing every 2 years is getting you nowhere as a franchise.
No, not at all.
So if you bring in Brian Daboll, and to me, the Giants are not going to be that much better next year. I mean, maybe they'll be a win or two better, but as we know, this roster has a ton of work to do. So you can't just, after another year or two of losing, say, oh, this guy's no good, and we bring in another guy, because the cycle will just keep continuing and the wheels just keep spinning. So that's what I look at the Giants right now. That's what I'm seeing. You have to tell me Daboll gets at least, I mean, I'm not going to put a exact timetable on it, but I would just say you have to give him time, because otherwise you're just not making any steps forward as a franchise.
No, I think it's well said. I think it's 100% agree, and I think it's going to come down to that QB position as it always does. And I just don't think Daniel Jones is the guy. I kind of feel like Brian Daboll knows Daniel Jones isn't his ideal QB. And I think that's kind of be a one-and-done kind of situation this next season because they're kind of stuck with him right now. And then they'll maybe move forward with someone else in a different QB class coming next season. But yeah, the Giants, we've talked about in previous podcasts. We'll talk about it more in the offseason. They're one of the most lost franchises right now in the NFL. Probably I would put in my bottom three, and they're going nowhere fast. But I did like the hire. I think there's a little bit of optimism for Giants fans out there, but they're a long ways off from getting back to playoff and Super Bowl contention.
It's interesting that I think we had a little bit of disagreements where I was higher on Peterson and you're higher on Daboll.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's funny. I mean, I guess we'll kind of see how that works out. But yeah, it'll be fascinating to watch. And you're also in a weak division, so at least you get a little bit of hope there. It's not the NFC West. We talked last time about Matt Eberflus going to the Bears. We also had another hire in that division that we'll talk about next podcast because it looks like Kevin O'Connell, the OC of the Los Angeles Rams, my Los Angeles Rams, will be the next head coach of the Vikings. But that's not been made official yet. So we're going to talk about that in our Super Bowl episode in a few days. So stay tuned for that. The only last hire I really want to talk about, Brian, is what did you think about Dennis Allen, which I kind of figured this is exactly where it was going to go, becoming the new head football coach of the New Orleans Saints as, Sean Payton kind of stepped away, he wants to do some different things. We kind of theorize where he is going to go next. And now the DC, we saw how he tortured Tom Brady, Dennis Allen in the games that he played him. He gets the head coaching spot. What'd you think of that move?
Yeah, this one for me is kind of an move.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't excite me. It's not terrible. It's just kind of right in the middle. I mean, I'm not overly excited about the Saints' future, even though they're playing
Mm-hmm.
in a pretty lackluster division. There's questions there, quarterback wise.
Oh,
Are they
yeah.
going to go with Taysom Hill? I mean, they
The whole
seem to like
division's
him,
got
but
those.
yeah. And you and I have both been skeptical about Hill's ability as an every
Oh, yeah.
down passer. So I mean I'm not sure what they're doing there. We know Dennis Allen was previously the head coach with the Raiders. That was a team that was a
Mm-hmm.
mess at the time. So I don't know how much stock you
Yeah,
put
about
into
10
that.
years ago.
He's Yeah, he's had success as the defensive coordinator, but I just look at the Saints right now and see them as kind of a middling team. They've got some talent, but I think they're, 500 to sub 500. I don't think Dennis Allen walks in and makes them necessarily better. I think it's a significant downgrade from what they had in Sean Payton, and that's, I think, pretty obvious.
Yeah, I agree with that. I actually do like the hire. I think it's a really solid hire. I really do like him as a defensive mind. My issue is kind of very similar to yours. The QB position is in free fall. You don't know what the hell is going on there. I know the division is way weaker, and there's not a lot of great QB play now with the stuff we'll talk about that happened in Tampa Bay. But then you have the situation that even though I know he cleared and he is a free man at the moment, you have the entire situation with Kamara that went on during the Pro Bowl, and how's that future going to work out? Those were some not fantastic reports, to say the least, that I'm sure you saw as well in terms of his, being arrested and questioned by the police in terms of a battery kind of incident that ended up happening. So between that, the Michael Thomas stuff that has gone on, there's been a lot of issues that have happened with this team, on top of they're strapped against the cap, on top of they don't have tons of playmakers and tons of talent, and they have no QB, I'll say again. So I see the Saints as being a 500 team, but you know what? Next season, that might help them win the division. You never know, Bri, considering
Yeah,
I guess we'll
that's
just have to
true.
see really what happens in Tampa Bay. With that being said, I think our final thing really to talk about tonight, the awards happened tonight. I don't think there's really much to talk about there. Bri, I don't know if you wanted to highlight anything. Rodgers won his 4th MVP. Cup won
Mm.
Offensive Player of the Year. Andrew Whitworth, it was very nice to see, probably in his final year, won the Walter Payton Man of the Year, very prestigious honor, so that was awesome to see. Does a lot of great community work. TJ Watt won Defensive Player of the Year, tying Michael Strahan's record. And yes, for the people out there, they're saying, well, he had one more game. He actually played less games than Michael Strahan, so, with injury, so put that to bed. But he had a fantastic season. There was no surprise that happened. The rookies kind of happened the way you thought it would. Chase won on the offensive side. You had Micah Parsons win on the defensive side. I mean, no shocks there at all whatsoever. It was very nice. I lobbied for him, I believe, a couple weeks ago. It was very nice to see Mike Vrabel get a win for head coach of the year. I really thought everything that he did with Tennessee, despite how the postseason game went, I really thought that was a really impressive job. And Joe Burrow, not surprisingly, wouldn't come back player of the year, given that his damn team is in the Super Bowl and he came back from a devastating knee injury in his first year. I mean, was there anything awards-wise that you disagreed with tonight, or did it kind of go the way you thought it would?
Well, you just ran through all of them. I mean, I did
I
not
tried.
watch the show, but no, I mean, I think they all made sense. Another great year for Rodgers. I don't really think it was that close between him and Brady. I was always Team Rodgers as far as the MVP. Micah Parsons, and what a year! Now, I mean, I think the praise is getting a little too far for him, where some people are comparing him to Lawrence Taylor,
Yeah,
which
we
is a
gotta
bit
we gotta
much.
relax.
Yeah, I mean, like, very impressive rookie year. Like, when you watch the Cowboys on defense, he just popped off the page always. Let's settle down. I mean, it's one year. You're not going to compare him to best defensive player of all time. So that's where people get a little crazy. But other than that, yeah, I like the picks. I don't think there was anything too controversial there.
No, I really thought I didn't watch the entire show, but I kind of saw the read out of it. Agree with every one of them. I don't think there was anything. You saw also Dan Quinn win Assistant Coach of the Year. I think what he did with that Cowboys defense, which was featuring Micah Parsons, he deserved that win as well. But let us know what you thought about your picks down below. The final thing you have to talk about, Bry, before we get out of here is the GOAT, Tom Brady. Announced his retirement. It was kind of done in a awkward way because someone clearly from his team leaked some information. And so kind of the journalist came out about a day and a half before Tom Brady was ready to say anything. You've seen his agent Don Yee and a few other people, including the Tampa Bay Bucks, kind of refuting that with Jason Light. And then he kind of made an Instagram post about a couple days later. He was supposedly on vacation out of the country. And he said, yeah, it's time to walk away. Now, since he's kind of been messing with us, and he said some things on some podcasts of, you never say never if I come back, or a lot of other kind of alluding that there's a possibility that maybe he could come back, maybe it would be after this season, whatever. For me at the moment, I think it's over, Bri. I think he's retired. I think he's happy. I think he's accomplished anything and everything you could possibly think an NFL player and a coach, and he was a coach on the field basically, but as a quarterback could accomplish. He's going to go down as the GOAT. He is the GOAT right now. I don't think anyone's ever going to surpass this man and everything that he did. I mean, what can you say? What do you say as a longtime Jets fan that went against this guy for 20 years? I mean, what can you say about Tom Brady retiring at, age 44, almost 45?
Yeah, well, I don't disagree about all that he's accomplished and how he wouldn't have anything left to prove. And even with that being the case, I could still see him coming back.
Yeah,
I really could.
It's giving you nightmares.
Don't think it's over. It just doesn't feel complete. First of all, we got to address this. Is he having a press conference? You have to figure he's going to have a press conference,
I don't know,
right?
Bri. I don't know. Is he?
Like, I haven't heard, but I mean, for that monumental of a player announcing his retirement, like, he's got to get before the media. So I find that kind of strange that he
The whole
hasn't.
thing
I mean,
has
he
been
can't just
weird.
leave it as an Instagram post.
Yeah, it's been weird.
But anyway, I know the odds are probably slim. I can't rule it out, and I certainly think it could happen. But I mean, the accolades, you could go on, and they've been well documented by everybody, the number of Super Bowls. The thing that stands out is like the longevity, playing 22 years, and the fact that it basically was two different Hall of Fame careers that he had. Like you think about the first three Super Bowls, wherever you draw the line, so you draw 2010, 2011, he had the three Super Bowls early, and then he has another 10 to 12 years where he gathers up four more Super Bowls.
Yeah, it's like another renaissance he had. It's incredible.
Yeah. So it's just, through the years, just incredible, like, how he's elevated to the players around him. Like, a lot of times, we know he's played with some great players like Randy Moss and those kind of guys, but how many players did he make better? Where you looked at the Patriots and was like, how are they doing this? A guy like Julian Edelman would not nearly have been the player without Brady. Wes Welker, same
Deion
thing.
Branch. Yeah. I mean, you could go on
Exactly.
and on.
You can go on, and even as good as Gronk is, like, he's so much better from playing with Brady. You can't deny it. So he's just elevated the performance of players around him. And I think that really, more than anything else, is the mark of a great player. The amount of winning he's done, just incredible. Just the drive and competitive nature. I just don't think we see it from another athlete, really, ever. Just that drive that he has to play and be at the top of his game at 44 years of age.
Arguably his best statistical season ever. I mean, he was in the MVP conversation.
Exactly. It's not about a diminishing of skill. I think more than anything is the pressure from his family that we've seen about his wife coming out and saying she's tired of seeing him get hit.
Yes.
And I think that's it more than anything else. He certainly looks like he could play probably another couple of years. I mean, he could play for as long as he wants. But yeah, I mean, look, the NFL's going to be a lot different without Brady. Yes. There's no doubt about it. I mean, it's been like our entire lifetime watching football that we've watched this
really
guy.
Has. It really has. I was, I think I said it last podcast where I didn't think he was going to retire. I was genuinely shocked that he retired. Could a comeback happen? Sure. I just don't think it will given the family situation. But he's a guy that he's going to have to find something to do in his second life because he's going to be bored out of his mind with his competitive drive. There's only so much family you could spend time with. He's going to have to work on his TB12 program, kind of his business ventures and his entertainment ventures. He's really going to have to become like Peyton Manning has with some kind of ESPN or Fox deal or something. Maybe he needs to go into coaching. I mean, who knows? He's going to have to find something to kind of get that quench that thirst he has for just competition. But you could spend an entire podcast talking about the greatness of Tom Brady and everything he's brought to the game and what the NFL is going to be like going forward. We've seen a few of these QBs. And we saw Breeze, obviously, right? He retires last year. We saw Big Ben retire this year. We saw Phillip Rivers last year. Like, a lot of these mainstays have gone out in the last couple of years. Some of them Hall of Famers, some of them borderline Hall of Famers. But to have the GOAT go out, to have the uncertainty that the Bucs are going to have now that they're facing it, I think a little bit quicker than they thought that they were going to be. It's going to be a different world, and I'm fascinated to see what next season looks like for the first time since I can remember in my life of not watching Tom Brady. It's going to be weird. It's going to be really weird. But hey, hats off to him. Fantastic career. Hell of a competitor. The GOAT, obviously. And I look forward to seeing what he does next.
And I think, the one thing that sums up his longevity, like thinking about our lifetimes of watching football, this was a guy who was winning Super Bowls when we were in elementary school, say third and fourth grade, and was still winning Super Bowls after we were done with college.
Yeah, I know. It's just, it's really insane when you think about it. And that's why I just don't think anyone's ever going to do this again. I really don't. There's always, players that kind of just make impacts later on, but not like this. There's just never going to be anything like this again, in my opinion. And I'm just glad that I got to see it, right? How many great players did we always hear about from old heads and in somewhere that we meet, whether it's your parents' house or in a bar somewhere of like, oh, if you watched LT play, if you watched this player play, we got to see this guy play effectively every snap of his career. That's something that we should take pride in, that we've seen the greatest of all time play NFL football.
No question.
Yeah. So, guys, with that being said, it's been a fun podcast. It's been a great podcast. We talk about a lot of stuff here from, head coaching hires, Tom Brady's retirement, and, of course, previewing and giving our thoughts and our X factors on the Super Bowl between the Bengals and the Rams. It was a lot of fun here. When we record our next podcast, I could be very happy or I could be very distraught. We'll have to see what happens in Super Bowl 56. But either way, hopefully, it is a fantastic game. Bri, I want to thank you for joining me, man. Any last thoughts, anything you want to plug? What do you want to say to the people?
Yeah, I was just thinking, we were talking with the Super Bowl about the Rams hosting the Super Bowl, playing in front of their home fans. And it just got me thinking, like, so many years we talked about how that never before happened. And now it's almost like old hat that, oh, yeah, it happened last year and nobody cares now. And then you add the fact that they're not even considered the home team. The Super Bowl's different anyway in that it's a very corporate crowd. It's not as much, team fans. But I just find that funny that, like, that was such a big headline every year was like, will we ever see a team host a Super Bowl in its own building? And now it's happened back-to-back years. It seems like it's a side story.
It really is. It's just incredible. But I'm happy to see it. All the pressure that the Rams have had, and they got to this point. I'm really excited. But guys, hopefully you have a great time out there in your Super Bowl parties or Super Bowl get-togethers. I hope you're off from work. I hope you're able to enjoy the game, and I hope it's a great game. Enjoy what's probably going to be a great halftime show. And we'll talk to you next time, guys. As always, in the description is timestamps. Also, is our Twitter accounts. So if you want to watch me live tweet and cry during the Rams game, you can see that. So follow us down below. We greatly appreciate it. We talk sports and all that other jazz. And, of course, always NFL football. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, share with your friends if you be so kind. And until next 1st and 10, guys, which will be our final one to conclude our second season. Thanks for watching.